our beautiful CODA panel. I'm shocked there are more people that showed up today that I did not expect. Thank you, thank you. I think, wow, it feels very overwhelming because this is really the first time we have a Jewish CODA panel. I've seen other ones on YouTube and I've seen different ones at conventions, but not a Jewish CODA panel. It's really very exciting, and I've had a lot of fun doing the research for this and meeting more people and finding out more background to people's stories. And we have a common link as CODAs, but we also have like individual stories that are just really fascinating. One is more fascinating than the other. It's really amazing. I had the wonderful experience last week. I took a few CODA kids with me to the pizza store. We had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And every day I'm thinking of more things that I have to research deeper now. I think that we'll see today that CODAs today have a different role than CODAs in my time. Maybe your time and your time, I don't know. But it was very interesting to me, very exciting, because my ASL students were shocked to realize that I just recently, they all want sign names right away. I said, no, it's not, I can't give you a sign name, I'm sorry. Deaf culture, no way. You have to earn that name from a deaf person. I said, I grew up with a deaf mother and father. I grew up in MSD school, and I still did not earn my mom gave me kind of a cute one, but not one that was accepted by everybody. But recently, thanks to Shira, I got my sign name. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Esther with an E. Thank you, thank you. That really makes me happy. So I told my students, you have to wait like I did. You have to be patient. So most of you already know my story. So today I'm going to question everyone here on our panel, because we don't know, I think, most of their stories. I grew up with a deaf mother and father, thank God. Wonderful role models, amazing parents. Some of you have met my mom already. Some of you know my father, Elva Shalom's story. But CODAs in general have one very similar character trait. They're all proud to be a CODA. It's very interesting. I've met kids that have grown up in other bilingual homes. They're not proud to be French or proud to be Spanish or proud, but CODAs, it's a very similar character trait, that they're very proud to be CODAs. So I'm still, come. I'm still researching about that, but I'm very excited to continue the research. So now we're going to start the questions, and I hope, like I already learned a lot, I hope that you'll all learn new things today also. Some of the CODAs, like Reva, Priestman, and Shiffy Castor couldn't make it today, but they already gave their answers, so I'll try to include their answers also. Very, very interesting. First of all, Liba taught me how to spell CODA. I always spelled it with a capital. She said, no. When you're talking about CODA people, you only use a capital C, then small O-D-A. But if you're talking about the organization or international CODA, then it's capital C-O-D-A. So I was very excited to learn that. I want to know the right way. So thank you. Okay, are we ready? First, I think I should probably introduce, most of you know our panel. Yitzi Friedman. Oh, sorry. You're a CODA.
I'm sorry, Esther.
Martin?
There's a name sign, if you have a name sign.
Oh. Ooh. The king. His mother probably gave him that name sign. Okay, would you like to sign?
No.
No, okay, I'll sign. Mordecai? Mordecai. The name? Orden? Okay. Do you have a sign name? No, no, okay. And your mother's here with us today? Yes, and you grew up in Baltimore?
No. Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, very nice. Okay, I think we have that similarity with our next guest. This is Mrs. Faggy Friedman, and I met her mother yesterday. Faggy Friedman, same last name as Yitzi Friedman, Faggy Friedman, but they're not related. Different Friedman. Faggy's from Brooklyn also, right? Right. And I met her mom yesterday for the second time, but I got to know her more. We talked more about her background. Her mom is a Holocaust survivor. It was really amazing. I mean, it was really surfacey. I hope that I can talk with her a little bit more, but amazing stories. Her mom, you know, the horrible Nazi Mengele did experiments with her mom because she was deaf, and her sister, he thought they were twins because they were both deaf, but they were not twins, but he took them anyway. So it's really an amazing story. Our next guest is Tavi Kaplan. Thank you for coming. And do you have a sign name? Not really, not really. Our next guest is Shoshi Swerdlove, and you have a sign name. Shoshi, right? Shoshi. Why is that your sign name?
I don't know.
Oh, her favorite show was Dora Dora? I thought your mom said because you like to ask questions, right? Questions, right? Maybe. Our next guest is Chava Kaplan. Thank you so much for coming. We really had a good time learning about our CODA relationships. It was really fun. Okay, now we're gonna ask some questions.
You ask the CODA, ask the mic.
Yes.
You have an interpreter, sign language interpreter, so you can just speak. Okay?
Yeah, can you hold that? Yeah, you can just speak, you don't have to sign. Right. You want to sign, you can sign. Yeah. Hi.
Baby. Your mother's name, what's your mother's name? Meisner, Malvina Meisner. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so our first question. CODA kids, I'm going to save some questions for you. I'm going to start with Tavi, and then we'll come back around, and I have specific questions for you. And I'm so happy you came. Okay, Tavi, we discussed this already. What age did you realize that your family might be a little different?
I don't know. I mean, never really. Always just kind of. Can you speak louder? Oh, that's always just kind of been.
Oh yeah, use the mic.
It's kind of just like that's just always how it was. It was never really something like, oh, this is different.
This is something that I think is different from CODAs today, as opposed to CODAs in my day. In my day, it was very different. Today, we're living in amazing times where sign language is so cool, and everybody wants to learn sign language. In my day, I would go places and hearing parents would push my hands down if I tried to sign. You don't see that very often today. So I think that the CODA kids today really have an advantage over the CODAs from, a long time ago.
That's true. Question?
Yes.
I always thought that maybe the CODA kids, they realized that they were different when they went to public school. Jewish school or pre-nursery class, you know, or when they went to playgroup. At that time, they realized, you know, you don't bang on the table. People look at you if you bang on the table for attention. That's a different culture. That's a cultural conflict. So maybe that's the time that hearing kids recognize that there's a difference. The code is recognized as a difference.
Can I pass it to Mrs. Freeman? Mrs. Freeman, when did you realize that things were kind of different in your household?
So I think I would agree with Mr. Kritzman. I think I first realized when I started school. When I was younger, before going to school, it was a very sheltered environment with my family, and we had some relatives and close friends, and somehow there was a feeling of acceptance. It wasn't until I met other children my age and realized that their parents weren't deaf that it became very apparent to me that my parents were different.
Thank you.
This is Mordechai Gordon. I don't recall seeing a difference at all when I was a kid. That my parents were one way and other people were different ways, but it wasn't something that really struck me. There was obligations that I had to do. I had to hear someone at the door or get the phone or something in that respect. But as far as people, they were just people who couldn't hear. There wasn't any big revelations that they were done.
I think I would agree.
A little louder?
Sure. I would agree that it was really when I got to school that we noticed the difference. My school did a wonderful job of building it up and bringing in a sign language interpreter and making it something that was interesting and cool for the class. So that even though it was clearly different, it wasn't necessarily a negative thing. So I think that was a good approach to it.
Very good. The second question, we'll start with you and then go back. Did your parents teach you sign language? And
Yes.
do you think that it helped you, you know, along the way? Did it help you with anything in, you know, in your life?
Yeah, we all grew up signing. I think most of us, I'm the youngest, so it's hard to remember. But from what I understand, most of us could sign before we could speak. And I think I maybe spoke the earliest because I had 4 older siblings who were already speaking. I grew up kind of in a mixed house. But I think having been taught sign language at an early age was very helpful for me. I think it certainly gave me a different perspective. And even to this day, knowing sign language continues to be helpful. And I will speak especially a variety of
Mr. Gordon?
My mother was very oral, so she could read my lips, and there was really no problem. My father wasn't, so I had to sign to him. So I grew up speaking with sort of mixed sign language.
Did it help you out in the world in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I was always comfortable listening to deaf people in conversations and things like that, so it never fazed me one way or the other. But actually,
It's exciting for me to hear your answers, because I did not have that same experience. For some reason, I don't know why, and I apologize to my mother every Yom Kippur, but I was very embarrassed to sign in front of my public school friends. Not so much when I went to Beis Yaakov, oddly enough, but I remember when I first went to public school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I wasn't so excited about signing in public, and I would walk ahead of my parents sometimes to avoid having a conversation that might lead to signing in public. And it's so inspiring to hear that CODAs are not, that a lot of CODAs are not, because I wish I had never had been.
actually, I agree with your initial assessment. I was very proud of my parents, and absolutely no problem, probably, or acknowledging that they were deaf or anything. It's not any problem.
So my parents didn't sign. They grew up in Europe, in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, and were educated in oral schools. So they did lip read. I grew up, I guess my first language was Hungarian, but of course I learned it from my parents, so it is very poor, and I wouldn't venture to speak it to someone who understands Hungarian. I've already been told it's barely understandable, but between gestures and Hungarian and some English, we did manage, but I will say that it's probably one of the single most greatest regrets in my life, because I think being able to sign with my parents would allow us to have much broader and bigger conversations. I think our communication was very limited because we didn't sign.
Did you learn sign language first? Was it a big part of your life? Was it more oral?
I know basic sign. I'm not great at it. I'm still learning. I always learned English first. I like sign language. I use it when I'm trying to talk to my parents, and it's loud. Like, I don't really have a problem using it when I can. I don't know all the words, but I can do it.
And you'd like to get better at it? You'd like to improve?
Yeah.
Great. Me too. Shoshi? Did you learn sign language first or speaking?
I don't know.
You don't know. And how's your sign language today? How's your sign language today?
Not that great.
How's your conversation with your parents? How does that
They
go?
understand me.
They understand you
That's
with,
all I need.
like, home gestures, home signs?
Because I grew up with a lot of hearing family around me. Because when I was little, I only really knew like 2 deaf people.
So when you want to have a deep conversation, you told me something about your phone. You can just,
Yeah, I really just like type on my phone. That's what my mom does.
right, and then your parents can read your phone. Yeah, see, that's a big difference from CODAs today than CODAs in my day. Chava, our youngest CODA today. How's your sign language?
It's not bad. It still needs a lot of work though, and not that great at it. But sometimes during assemblies in school, when I was trying to talk to Tavi, I would sign to her so that we could talk to each other.
It does, it comes in very handy. It comes in very handy.
And nobody knew what we were saying. So you have to be careful because the slightest speak about it, and everyone will ask you to sign your name.
People want to know sign language.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's great. Okay, so let's pass the microphone back to Tavi. Our next question. How has being a CODA enhanced your life? I think that's sort of like connected to the last question. Let me go on. What was your most funny experience as a CODA? And if you need time to think about it, we can come back. Okay, you can think about it. Mrs. Friedman?
I'm not so sure it was funny, but maybe like,
Typical.
I guess, I was in 9th grade and the students were giving speeches about some research that they had done. And one of the students in my class gave a 10-minute speech about children of deaf people. And she said the research shows that their speech isn't as clear and that they're hard to understand. And I was sitting in the audience, and I don't think she knew that in her class there was a student, there was a child of deaf parents. And I actually was pretty outspoken. So I think especially because I was always talking and I was the president of my class, that the irony was very clear, that she did all the research, but I disproved her research, so I guess that was kind of something.
Yes. Have you any interesting or funny CODA experiences?
Not that I can immediately recall, but actually while I was told about this meeting, I went online and I went to see what people were saying so I could have something to talk about. And I saw a cute video of a young lady, describing her experiences at CODA and how when she got her key, she'd be banging on the windows and calling for and waving her arms for attention and all of the things that one would go through. And the very fact that if your parents call you, you can't say no. You can't say, I'll be there in 10 minutes. You have to be there because otherwise they're going to keep on calling you. So that's one of the experiences that I really have.
That's very true, that's very true, yeah.
Okay.
I think two things pop into my mind. One is very often if someone, either at school or wherever we were, friends of mine would ask me things, and I was able to tell my parents to say no so that I wouldn't have to do it, but the other person never knew that. So just that privacy of conversation between me and my parents is very, very convenient. And I think the other thing that popped into my mind is something along the lines of what Mordechai was saying about just getting my father's attention in various public places, and how it's very common for, I guess, I don't know if it's just CODAs, or deaf people, where you'll throw something kind of in the general vicinity so that they'll see, and then they'll look for you. And people thought that was so disrespectful or so awful. And I would try to explain to them, like, no, that's just how they need to know that I would like to talk to them. And if I can't get over there, it's very realistic. So I think that was always a very interesting experience for everybody.
Wow, those are great experiences.
Question.
And I want to, oh, sorry, yeah.
I have a question. I want to know what your experience was with deaf parents depending on you and using you as an interpreter. Can you talk about that? Did you feel like obligated to your parents, or you just accepted it?
It definitely happened. I think, with the video relay services, and even when I was growing up with the TTYs, there was less of that, but it definitely did happen. It was something that was sometimes, I think, annoying, but it was never something that I think was overused or overdone or something that I felt like was a full-time job or anything like that. So that, it was an inconvenience.
I grew up in a world without the modern conveniences they have today. But I happened to be spared because I was lucky enough to have an older brother who they relied on, and he was very good at it. So he used to, he bore most of the brunt of interpreting for my parents, so I really was sheltered for a lot of that. But I still had to answer the phone. When the phone rang, my father had a local contracting business where he got a lot of phone calls. I had to be on this job, I had to be on that job. And I had to relay messages and stuff. And sometimes being put in an embarrassing situation, but it was something to do.
Did you feel that you had to, that you matured more quicker than your friends, your peers?
Not me, but my brother did. And I had a brother, and he's never been a brother. He had passed away years ago, but he grew up very quickly, and he had finished high school by the time he was 15. And it was just, but
Different times.
he to interpret with them, and he grew up much quicker than I did. I sort of like mellowed out, but he grew most of the time.
So I, like Mordecai, also had older siblings. I have an older sister and two brothers. But I think we all had our fair share. Not everyone is around at all times. I don't think I can recall it feeling a burden. It was just something that was just part of, the natural order of things. I will say that today it feels more like a privilege to be able to give back to my parents what they did for me. So it, it's not something I take for granted, and of course my father passed away, but my mother is elderly, and I'm just grateful for every opportunity that I have to act for her.
Yeah, I've interpreted with my parents before. It's just
Is
sometimes.
it fun? Is it a responsibility? How does it feel?
Just kind of a thing that you do. I mean, sometimes like you're just out of place and they say something and it's really loud and it's just very hard to hear, so you just sign it.
Question?
Very nice.
Do you ever have people talk to you, a child, and ask the parent with the child and go to the parent was both upset. Not really with me, but they were upset because they were being treated like a child and trying to make music with the adults.
Right, did people
What
like,
is the same,
you know,
yes.
like, we understand, like, when I'm interpreting, I always tell the hearing person, talk straight to the deaf person as if they can hear, and I'll interpret. But sometimes, if hearing people don't have that experience, they'll talk to you because you're the hearing one. Was there ever a conflict? Did you feel
I mean,
tension?
that has happened before where as soon as they realize like, oh, parents didn't hear it, they'll just talk to you and then you just sign it back. It's never really been a problem. I mean, sometimes I feel weird about it because like they're talking to me, but they're really talking to the other person. But it's never been like a bad thing. They just don't understand.
Sure, right. Do you have anything to add about that?
I've never felt that it was offensive. I can't recall a situation. Most people just understood that my parents couldn't respond, and but it wasn't disrespecting them. I don't think. But I think it's interesting because even yesterday when you were at my house, I was still signing to my mom still looked at me to interpret. Even though you were trying so hard to talk directly to her, she's
used to relying on you.
used to relying on us, and we said to her, look at Esther, and she still turned to us.
Actually, I never felt that you were talking to me and lifting my parents. In fact, I had sort of the opposite reaction. People were telling me how wonderful my parents were and how great they were doing and how special they were. And that's most of the people they forgot.
I think that has happened to me. And I think maybe it was me noticing that my parents were frustrated by it, that they wanted to be addressed directly, and that they really were fully capable of managing whatever it was that they were doing, but they weren't being communicated with. And I think that may have been one of the harder things that as a child you have to do, which is to tell the other adult you have to talk to my parents. As an adult now, it's much easier, but when I remember when you're 11 and 12, that's a big challenge to say to people. And my parents, I think, did a good job trying to tell them directly, like, no, look at me, but it wasn't always clear. So that, I think, was a challenge. But, yeah.
Children of deaf parents often interpret, like my daughter Liba, she's very fluent in sign language, and for her, and often she tells people who, people say, Liba, tell your mother, tell her. And Liba says, speak directly to my mother. She can lip read you, or I can help and interpret for you if there's something part that you don't understand, part of the conversation. But many hearing people in the community, they're just not direct. They're not direct with us. They don't speak straight to us, and they depend on my children to interpret. I'm like, really? Come on. I can lip read, I can gesture. And if I can't, I can ask my child to interpret, but don't depend on my children, and that upsets me.
Please.
Like, I missed that, like what? They're used to it, right, that's what they're used to, so they take advantage of using the children as the interpreter. I want to add, my parents were in a crowd with the family, with cousins, aunts, and uncles, and my parents, they were like, they didn't care, they were used to it. They were communicating with each other, and they felt lost, so I felt bad when I saw my parents being, looking around and feeling lost. I would interpret for them. I would add them, come in and interpret for them. I would say, look, you can speak to my parents, they're oral, they can understand, they can lip read, but, speak to them directly. But on the other hand, still, it was faster sometimes if I could sign, and I had more patience with my parents. Sometimes the conversation was moving too quickly, so I would be willing to interpret for my parents. And I would ask people to slow down. Like, I'm deaf too, and I'm trying to interpret, but, slow down, but I would try to help out as well. And my parents often felt like that. I just want to add one more thing related to what my wife said. My wife said all about the kids. Sometimes they help the interpreter. I tend to try to tell my kid, don't interpret for me till you hear that I missed a key word. If I miss the content, or if I miss, or if I keep asking and you're noticing that I'm struggling and missing it, then, could go around and feed me a word or sign, and then I'll be like, oh, got it, feed me, key me in, so I'll know what I missed. If you hear that it's happening again and again. So, that you have to learn my system. I wanted my kids to learn my system. That was easy for me. But yes, sometimes when I don't want to and I'm tired of lip reading, so yes, and if my kids are willing, then sometimes I'll ask them to interpret.
We've made so much progress. I was very fortunate that I grew up at MSD, that environment. So I had a deaf world, a big deaf world, and I was very lucky because I learned a lot of deaf culture, and all our friends were deaf. But at the same time, we had a very big hearing world also. So I was able to observe my parents in both worlds, and they were very, communicative with both worlds. So I learned a lot how to communicate with different kinds of people, and I'm just fascinated now, looking back at their example of how to get along with everyone and how to talk and communicate with everyone. It doesn't matter which language. The truth is, if it was the deaf world or the hearing world, or as English, French, Spanish, it didn't matter because they taught me how to communicate with facial expressions and gestures. So it was just an amazing time growing up. But I must tell you, when we lived in Israel for about 12, 13 years, it was an amazing experience for many reasons, obviously, but I remember my children learned Hebrew very quickly. Like after 2 months, they were already speaking fluently. It was incredible. So I remember one time we needed to fix something, and a repairman came to the door, and he knocked on the door. We opened the door, and he started speaking in Hebrew so fast, so fast. I was like, oh, wait. And I called my five-year-old daughter, and I said, come here, what is he saying? And I was shocked, because I realized in that minute how my parents felt. And I remember, like, the man is standing there, and I'm crying and crying. He said, what did I say? What did I say? And I said, nothing. I must call my mom right now. And I said to my mom, I don't know what to say, but now I know how you felt for so long. Because you had to depend on children for interpreting, and you were a very educated adult, very smart. You knew everything, you knew more than me all the time. Amazing parents, but you still had to call on me for interpreting and communication. And now I have so much appreciation for all your challenges, more than my challenges. Your challenges for much more. So I had a very deep appreciation and thank my parents every day for that. Okay, now I wanted to go back to our CODA kids, our KODA kids here. Can you think of a funny experience that you had or something that you can do because maybe your parents are deaf? And be careful, your father's sitting right here. And there's transcription and there's interpreters all over the place.
Like, if I'm at a, like, shopping mall and, like, I see one of, like, the people in my grade that I'm not really fond of, I can, like, tell my mom, like, don't go up to them. I'm not really fond of that person, and they will.
You told them.
Your friend won't know.
Yeah, like, the person in my grade or, like, the person I know, if I'm not that fond of them and I don't want to, like, inform them that I can see them and that I'm there, I can just, like, tell my mom, like, ignore. Leave.
That is,
So
it's our secret language.
convenience.
Yes, it's convenience, yes.
This one happened last Saturday. I was using one of my dad's things, and Aviva, my sister, said, "Are you allowed to use that?" And went to ask my dad if I was allowed to, but he was taking a nap, so she was just saying, "Dad, Dad, 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 Dad," a lot, so many times, but he had his hearing aid off, so he couldn't hear her. And after about 10 minutes of saying that, he finally woke up.
Wow.
And she was finally able to tell him after 10 minutes.
That is funny. Oh. Okay, our next CODA question. We'll start with you, Howard. Where do you think all the CODA pride comes from? Being a child of deaf adults. Do you want to think about that? What do we have to be proud of as CODAs?
Knowing more sign language than other people.
Excellent. Joshi? Knowing more sign language than other people.
Like if there was a game at like your sleepaway camp, if it's like all new people and like something special about you. That's like the thing you can just like default to.
Right. My parents are deaf. I know sign.
And it's like, because I go to like a Hebrew school where we like learn Hebrew half the day and like English half the day. Well, not in middle school, but in lower school, that's like what you do. And so it's like 3 languages instead of like everybody else is learning 2.
Excellent. Yes, we are trilingual. Absolutely. Abby?
Again, being a CODA, I think, is just something that people do think is interesting. Like, people think that knowing sign in general is like, it's kind of like a thing that people think is interesting, like it's cool for some people. But again, like, I think it's interesting to like meet another side of the Jewish community, and I like going to the events and stuff like that.
You're saying Jewish community, you mean the hearing or the deaf?
No, like part of, it's like
Being
another
part
part of the Jewish community.
Of the deaf community.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely.
Mordecai had mentioned that you got a lot of feedback about your parents being special, and I did too. People, especially because my parents were Holocaust survivors. My mother was a very talented seamstress, so I got a lot of positive comments about my parents, so I think the pride came from that. And also knowing that they built a life in America and raised 4 children and have a lot of nachas from their children, that I think that pride just comes from their success.
It's an interesting thing. It's L now, and I don't know if it's so much a product of deafness or whatever, but growing up, my mother could never say anything bad about anybody, and I believe that all my relatives were the most special people in the world, until I found out. But it was the fact that they were in a lot of ways isolated in that respect, that it was just a very positive aspect of my growing up.
I agree with you, same thing. They didn't waste time gossiping.
I think a lot of that pride comes from going back and really developing comes from as you become an adult and face your own regular human person, hearing person challenges, which are challenging, and then you'll really develop an appreciation for your parents and having gone through all the same things with an additional challenge really makes it that much more impressive and something that you're very proud of.
Exactly. With all the challenges I can think of with raising children and raising a family, and then to think that my parents had deafness on top of that was just outstanding. Just an outstanding thing. And without saying too much, most of you know my sister, Jolie Bernstein. We both, even though my father died at a very young age, 42, I was 9, and my sister was 6, his love for Judaism and his commitment to synagogue life and Jewish community, and just in general, being a mensch. I remember going into Maryland School for the Deaf. He was a teacher there. And after school, he would go into the dormitory. And these little children, deaf children especially a long time ago, they went to dormitories sometimes at 4 and 5 and 6 years old. Like they started very early in the dorm. And we would go into the dorm, and I was a little kid then, probably 6 or 7 myself, and I'm pulling on my dad and I'm saying, let's go home. And my father said, these children don't see their parents for months at a time. We have to make sure that they have everything they need. I was a dorm kid, and it's a very lonely experience until they realize that they have deaf parents here at school. So just wait, and we'll be able to go home, because you get to go home every night. These children don't. So I learned so much from my father in a very short amount of time. Unfortunately, I didn't have him that long. But his love for Yiddishkeit, his love for the shul and the Jewish community, and getting involved and never ever letting his deafness hold him back. I was very fortunate that my Rabbi Kazan Olav Shalom, kept notes that my father and he wrote, and my father built things for the shul, and my father brought us to shul, and he was involved in everything that was going on. Never asked for an interpreter. He just was grateful for whatever he could get out of the shul. And after he died, the Jewish community was so supportive, and the rabbi came for sure once a month, if not twice a month, to check in on us and help my mom and check our report cards. And that really led to my sister and I really choosing, I would say, a certainly more orthodox way of life than all my other cousins who grew up with hearing parents and had all the advantages of that life. I think my sister and I are probably the only two religious cousins out of all of us. And very, very grateful to our parents for their commitment to Judaism and for not letting their deafness or any other handicap hold them back. So that kind of leads me to my next question. What would you say as a CODA has been the most positive experience that you've had with your shul or rabbi? I was very blessed. So that was an easy question for me to come up with and answer. My rabbi was always working on an interpreter fund for the shul. And what could your parents do to be more involved, and what do your parents want to do? And I think I was very fortunate that my rabbi, he did not look to me when he spoke to my parents. He looked my parents straight in the eye, and they got it. Sometimes with my help a little bit, but they just understood. It was like heart to heart. And till today, I mean, my mother, feels very, very close to the rabbi's family, and we're all very, very close, and that truly set my sister and I up for, thank God, a very rich life in the Jewish community and in Judaism. You girls think about that. You girls think about that. As a CODA,
we grew up across the street from Heinemann, and down the Goldberger show. And from my understanding, my parents always had good relationships with both of those people. It's interesting you mentioned, of all the people, I think I interpreted the least for those two than for most other adults that my parents communicated with. Rabbi Heinemann is hard to understand for a hearing person.
yes.
But he managed to get the information across to my mother, to my father, however was necessary. I think that was great. I also think growing up, not necessarily this is through a synagogue, but I remember the Pesach Sudan, where I know many of you from, were literally the highlight of the whole year. And it was amazing, and we all looked forward to it, all of the different kids in their own way. It was really a very cool thing.
Thank you.
Again, I come from a totally different perspective. I didn't grow up in a conservative house. We went to shul maybe the high holy days. That was the extent of it. Although we grew up in a very Jewish environment, but here's where it changes a little bit. When I was growing up, my mother came from. My mother's father was an Orthodox man. He lived in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And from the time I was a baby, my mother was telling me what a wonderful person he was. That he was she grew up amongst 5 other siblings. But being deaf, she got the love from her father that the other kids probably didn't get. And she developed a special love for her father. And I can remember from the earliest days when I was a kid, I wanted to go to Hebrew school before I wanted to go to public school. And it was something very special being a firm Jew, an Orthodox Jew. Because I saw the pride in my mother's face. And it didn't happen that way, and I grew up, and I became from later on in college, but the background was there, and it was and that kind of experience. So, in a sense, whereas most of my other relatives are not from just like yours, it was the link of my mother's being deaf that provided a foundation for my becoming from.
So
so maybe veering a little away from the question, I think. But, so both my parents came from Hasidic backgrounds, so their faith was very strong even through the Holocaust. Although my mother had 3 siblings who went to Israel after the war, and they did not remain religious, even coming from the same background. But my mother has a very strong faith, and she too had the love of her father especially. She says her mother was very strong and would say Tehillim a lot. And we kind of joked that maybe it was her mother's Tehillim that saved her, but she did love her father, and her father, she'll say, her father gave her the message of, to stay strong and to, have faith. And she'll say, that's what kept me going even after the Holocaust. I don't recall any positive shul experiences. My parents were older. I didn't know a single other person their age that was religious and deaf. So they were very unique, so there was no kind of initiative in shul to accommodate them. But they were very accepted, and so.
They were satisfied with that.
I think so. I don't, I did feel, you brought it up yesterday, I always felt badly that my father could not have an aliyah. And that did bother me. And, well, my brother said that after my father passed away, that he had a dream that my father had a beard and was speaking in front of a crowd. He was like giving a Torah. And I thought to myself, well, maybe
Now,
next, right.
now.
So at the shul that we went to when I was a kid, it was in Virginia. My father was always very involved with the shul. He did a lot of stuff for the shul, and I can't remember a time that they were ever excluded from the shul. They always seemed very included. I was very young, so I don't really remember that much. But from what I remember, even now, like our shul has interpreters, so yeah.
So it feels good. It's a positive
I guess.
experience.
I don't know, like, I wouldn't talk for them, but from what I've seen, it's good.
Right. No, but you as a CODA, from your perspective. Right,
Um,
that's what I meant. You're right.
Yeah, like, it always seems okay. I don't know.
It's nice to have accommodations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shoshi?
So at Hezek, there's not really, there's like, we always use a CDOR that has like an English translation. So usually when we do have to go to school, we usually do not. But when we do, my parents just usually go and find some of their like friends of like parents of my friends or something. And I run away and find my friends, and I don't really know what happens.
Right. No
But
problem.
usually, and even if like we would like with Hannah's bat mitzvah, a ton of my mom's like deaf friends was coming from like Canada, from down here. They were all like coming, so we did need an interpreter, but it was just accepted, and it's always been accepted at Kazakh, so I never saw a problem.
Fantastic. You're very lucky because there were no interpreters in my day in public school or private school.
I don't really know because I spend every single day I go to school in groups, so I don't really have an idea of what's going on in the other school.
Right.
Who
Okay.
grew up interpreting?
Me, my sister's brothers grew up interpreting.
Pass that.
Sure. So we all grew up interpreting for the rabbi in shul. I still do as another deaf man at the shul where I gather now. I continue to do that. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It gives me something to do that I can pay attention during the speech.
That's right. That's right. to the Kaplan kids, how does it make you feel when Rabbi Silver says, when we have a large deaf crowd at the shul, and Rabbi Silver says, I just want to take this opportunity to welcome the deaf community that's joined us today, and I hope that you'll continue to come and you'll continue to enjoy our shul. How does that feel?
I'm not really not after that, but like, that sounds good. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's like a really good thing, like we accept.
Because I want you to know and to understand that it wasn't always like that. You know, in the good old days, in the good old days, it was, your parents just learned to accept not being included. And they just learned to nod their head and try to get along. And shul could have been a very, very lonely experience. So we're very fortunate today, and we're very
That's
fortunate.
very, very true, yes. Audience is saying very, she was saying that, and I'm one of them that felt that way.
We're very fortunate today. We have some ASL students here from CCBC and from Beis Yaakov. That sign language is such a cool language. It's an official language now. And I think that we could even get a picture of what, you know, in certain areas in the United States today, in Baltimore, Rochester, Washington, D.C., what Martha's Vineyard in the 1800s may have looked like. I think it was the 1860s in Martha's Vineyard, where there were an unusual amount of deaf people, and they mixed, it was almost even with deaf people and hearing people. So the hearing people learned to sign, and everybody got along like it was normal, like it was 100% normal. It was a deaf world, mainstreamed with a hearing world. You could walk into the bank, and the people that owned the bank or worked in the bank were deaf, and the hearing people knew exactly how to communicate with them. And the store owners could be deaf, or they could be hearing. It really didn't matter because everybody was able to communicate. The deaf were able to lip read, the hearing were able to sign, and I just see a whole change, like a sea change today. More and more times, more and more opportunities to learn sign language, and more people interested in learning sign language, that we're starting to see what that time in Martha's Vineyard might have been like. The other day, I don't know if she wants me to mention her name, but I was with one of my deaf friends, and we were standing in front of a store, and my deaf friend noticed that a hearing girl was standing outside the store, and she didn't know that she had to ring the bell to get inside. So my deaf friend immediately made eye contact with her, and she started showing her, you gotta ring the bell, you gotta ring the bell. And this hearing girl looked back at my deaf friend, and she started signing fluently. And the three of us just stood there, shocked, and she just started sighing. She looked like a regular frum girl, married woman, and she said the magic word, I went to Gallaudet. I got my degree from Gallaudet. So her name is...
I think I know who you're talking about. I know who that is.
Her name, you should know for yourselves, for if anyone needs a therapist or a social worker. Her name is Mindy Lipsky Jacobson, and she is a new member of our community. She wanted to come today, but she had a minor surgery on Friday. So she hopes to come to the next ASL meetup and meet all of you. So we're really living in amazing, amazing times. Okay, I think we're going to wrap this up with my last question. What would your personal message be as a CODA to the Jewish community today? And you can take a minute or two. Just think about it. Just think about it. As a CODA, as a child of deaf parents, what would be your message to the Jewish community today? Not to the Jewish deaf community?
or
Either,
general,
General.
general, yeah, general, yeah,
No, the general community, please.
general. I'll give you a few minutes to think about it. I already like wrote out my answer, so. I would say that as a CODA, we do have a responsibility to be a bridge. Together we can build bridges. Like as a Jewish community, we could look like Martha's Vineyard one day. Wow, what would that be like? What would that look like? We need to ask the Jewish deaf community to help us and assist us so that together we can all succeed. Part of my research, I saw that there's a CODA culture. There's actually a CODA culture. There's a deaf culture. There's not really a hearing culture here in America, I would say, because America is such a melting pot of so many different cultures that are sort of mixed together. We are living in fantastic times. Never has sign language been so accepted and so cool. And this is our time to build the longest and strongest bridge of all. What would you like to say to the community?
This is, I say just general. Don't single out people.
Oh, don't single out people. Nice.
And when you're talking to somebody who's deaf, look straight at them. And don't look somewhere else. Being deaf is really not a disability. Just treat deaf people like normal people.
Bravo.
Do your best to speak slowly and clearly. Just treat them like you would anyone else. Some people are very focused on like, oh, it's a disability, and they lump it into other things, which is like, yeah, I understand, but I think that anyone, you should just treat people like people. I don't know.
Yay.
And I'm gonna pass it to you.
I think a message specifically to the Jewish community at large is mirroring a lot of what the girls have already said, where don't treat them that differently, don't single them out, but also, to a certain degree, realize how important to Judaism and to all of our values connectedness is, and how if you don't, just like if you don't make the effort with the other people in your show, then it's not going to go well. These are also people in your show, and it requires this just the same level of effort, and it makes a big difference.
That makes sense. You're still thinking about it?
I would guess, realizing what your parents had to go through in the community, realizing that you had the opportunity to be of a help, and that you can, and that you have a special relationship and a special understanding where you can help other people. You can help other deaf people. You can help other people achieve what they need to achieve.
Maybe my message would be something that I learned from my mother, who felt that she didn't always want to be the recipient of good and goodness from others. She wanted to also be able to give. So I think to the Jewish community, I would say make a place for the deaf, and to the deaf, I would say make your place in the community so that benefit is going in both directions.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't know how to thank this incredible panel, from our youngest to our, I'm probably the oldest here. No. I'm just, you're being here today and showing up today and sharing your experiences from childhood all the way to adulthood, I think has helped. Oh, sorry. It's hard for me when there are deaf people here not to sign, I'm sorry. I'm gonna hold my hands. Yeah, that's always a hard thing for me. I think that, I know I've learned a lot through this whole process. The interviews I had with the younger CODAs and the interviews research I've done with the older CODAs. And today, I've just learned so much, and from your comments and your questions, that I think that we have an amazing opportunity here in Baltimore. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think that there's another organization like JADE that exists in any other community in the United States that's connected to a CJE or a JCC. And we have incredible opportunities here that Yael and her crew have paved the way for all of us to get involved and to do more and to continue this understanding and build bridges between the hearing and deaf community until we are completely one.
Amen.
Thank you so much for all coming today. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year. I know it's not enough, but do I have this? Thank you so much. I can't thank you. Yes. Parents are from London, Czechoslovakia too. But I'm just curious. I met people in Lakewood, in Lake New Jersey. I was born there.